What's going on, everyone? What of course you'll be seeing today is a two-part commentary breakdown on the Necrochasm, which is the exotic auto rifle in Destiny that can only be acquired through the Crota's End DLC, because it actually, in a multiple-step process, the last step requires you to kill Crota on hard mode to get the missing piece. But I'll break that down. The first two parts, of course, first part we'll be talking about how to go about getting it, and the second part we'll be reviewing and breaking down strengths and weaknesses and the utility of the weapon. As stated, it's a three-step evolutionary process to get it. The first, of course, is getting what's called Husk of the Pit, which is a random white engram drop when you it's similar to an engram when you kill a blade of Crota, which is a knight on Earth or the Moon. It'll pop up on your screen in Patrol when you actually get it, but be careful not to get rid of it from your inventory if you think it's just another white weapon you don't need. Hang on to it. To find the blades of Crota, there's two ways. You can do it through patrols, like I said, and you can look for the text at the bottom of the screen that'll says the minions of Crota are invading this world. A knight will spawn by close by, and the spawns are pretty frequent. The easiest way I found is to get a guaranteed spawn by loading up the mission called the Fist of Crota on Earth. Skip past Omnigul and kill the knight in one of the opening rooms when you enter the building. As stated, though, the Husk of the Pit is random, so there's no guarantees of getting it no matter how many of the blades of Crota you kill. I got lucky. It took me a few kills before it just popped up. I didn't even know what it was at the time. I had to go look it up. The next step is, once you've got the Husk of the Pit, you have to kill 400 to 500 hive enemies, and the easiest way I found to do this is to go into the Dark Beyond mission on the moon and kill some Thrall. When you're done, it's ready for upgrade. Visit Eris in the tower, and once you've reached the level 3 Eris through the bounties in the tower, buy an embalming orb for 10 wax black idols, and the best way to get these, of course, is to farm yellow bar hive enemies. You can do that through the Fogoth Strike or several of the new missions that came out in the DLC. And then once you actually have the embalming orb, you can upgrade that husk to the Eidolon Ally. The Eidolon Ally is the second evolutionary step. It's a legendary auto rifle, and obviously there's a lot more perks to make the weapon more viable because it's not a white engram, it's a legendary weapon. Once you're done leveling up this weapon, the very last perk for upgrade on the weapon will list needing a Crux of Crota, which means you're going to need to beat Crota, obviously, but the thing is you will have to beat him on hard mode to acquire it. You can't get it through a normal drop. The other thing, too, is it's a rare drop. It's not guaranteed. So just keep beating down Crota and hopefully it drops for you. Once you get the Crux, you can now upgrade that last evolutionary step to acquire the Necrochasm. The good news is that there's no further upgrading required once you actually use the Crux to upgrade the Eidolon Ally to the Necrochasm. That's it. You don't need to do bounties or go to strikes to level up the weapon anymore. It's ready to go. Now, for the review. Once acquiring the Crux, the Necrochasm has a max damage of 339 base. Many sources list this damage can or will increase to 356 in future updates or the next DLC, but of course that remains to be seen. You'll need Glimmer, weapon parts, and Ascendant energy to upgrade Eidolon Ally to the Necrochasm. The other form of Relic Iron Spirit Bloom may differ between you and me. The fire rate's listed at 100%, the impact is 2%. The range is 19%, stability rating of 46, a reload percent of 76, which is pretty good, and a magazine size of 42, and more on this in a second. The gun minus the perks, of course, on preliminary look has a strong reload percentage, a maxed out fire rate, but an extremely low impact, and the magazine size is the most telling point of this. Because if you compare it to, say, Dr. Nope or Atheon's Epilogue that have that sky-high fire rate, normally their magazine size is high to compensate for the fact that you're going to be dishing out lower damage per shot. But this weapon, and most of their magazines are in the 70s. This one is only 42, so that's a bit of a detriment. Like, the reload percent makes up for that fact, and it has a perk to address that, but I'll address these strengths, weaknesses, pros, cons in a minute. In terms of PvP damage output, it hits for 11 damage on non-critical shots and 13 on headshots. When breaking down the skill tree, all Necrochasms have no variations because they're all exotic weapons. They all deal arc damage, and they all have a perk connected to that called Cascade, which increases the reload speed of the weapon on melee kills, which has utility because you're going to be in close to medium range with this weapon anyway. You have 3 clear options in terms of recoil control. Accurized Ballistics, which increases range and impact, but also recoil. CQB Ballistics, which is the one I choose, which dramatically reduces recoil, but cuts down your range. And lastly, Aggressive Ballistics, which produces more manageable recoil, but also increases it. It slightly increases impact, but it also reduces stability. And like I said, my personal choice is CQB Ballistics for that recoil reduction only. And I'll get more on that. There's a lot of kick for this weapon. When you break down the skill tree, the most important perk and the most fun one is Cursebringer. When you land a precision kill, it has a chance to cause a cursed thrall explosion. I've read this occurs about half the time you get a kill through precision kills, but it can be streaky. I've had several chained together within a few kills in a row, and I've had times where I get like 5 or 6 kills and it doesn't do it at all. The next 3 perks which you have a choice over are Single Point Sling, which allows you to switch weapons faster and also to move quicker while aiming down the sights. Flared Magwell, which increases reload speed, and Fitted Stock, which increases the weapon's stability. The weapon kicks a lot even with this perk and CQB Ballistics, so it would be my choice because I wouldn't really want to imagine life without those perks. Because the perk, like I've said a few times now, is significant, or the kick is significant. The last perk is Rangefinder, which has the range of the weapon increased when you're aiming down the sights, which helps make up for the fact that you're sacrificing it when choosing CQB Ballistics. The rest of the perks, and there's 5 more, are damage upgrades. Now, before I begin my overall impressions, I must make some points about the feature perk of the weapon and why everyone wants it, Cursebringer. It does trigger about half the time you get precision kills, yes, but Cursed Thrall explosions have about a half a second delay between when you actually get the kill and when the explosion occurs, which does hurt the overall DPS utility and potential of the weapon. It's not like when you use the perk Firefly on say, Fatebringer, which is instantaneous. Also, if you cause an explosion within close proximity to yourself, you do not take damage, and that is wonderful considering that this weapon it will not be used past medium range, or you're probably using the weapon wrong. In PvE, this is a good but not great weapon if you don't mind using the low impact, high fire rate style weapons like Atheon's Epilogue. The fire rate's sky high, the recoil is at least manageable with the CQB Ballistics and Fitted Stock, and it frequently triggers a Thrall explosion on precision kills, which makes it extremely fun to use in areas with a lot of enemies, with mobs, or in even daily challenges. It will have utility in Nightfalls as well because of arc damage. That being said, it will struggle in endgame PvE content if you're at or below the level of your enemy, as the small magazine compared with the extreme fire rate will have you needing many magazines to drop major enemies. And you'll be taking more damage than you'll be putting out. So to be blunt, I wouldn't take this weapon into Crota's end, and especially not Crota's hard mode end, unless you want to be bitched at by your teammates for dying so much. And Arc Nightfalls, daily or weekly events, they'll be the fun part that you can dish out tons of damage with. But that being said, even if it's an Arc buff, Fatebringer or Fang of Ryut would probably have more utility there too. In PvP, I wouldn't even bother using it. The only draw to the weapon, which make it stands out, the explosions, has that half a second worth of a delay, which really cuts down on the utility of the weapon. Not to mention the fact that in PvP in the Crucible, I don't really see a lot of guys bunch up an awful lot. Like, it's not like every match I see tons together and the one explosion will chain and blow everything up. That won't be the case very often. It just won't. That's a fact. In addition, since each shot, headshot or not, does very little damage, it means you must be extremely accurate since every bullet counts. And to add to that, the weapon has manageable recoil at best in short and medium range. It feels very similar in terms of recoil management to Hardlight. It works best at about short to medium range, and then you'll be absolutely crushed by weapons at the higher damage models past medium range and on. Against most scout or auto rifles, you're already fighting a losing battle, and in PvP overall, I'd look elsewhere personally. So overall, in non-endgame PvE content, this weapon is extremely fun to use, and it isn't one of the worst weapons in the game, contrary to what the hive mind seems to be suggesting on a continual basis. I'll disagree with that. Perhaps the logic is that it's being used perhaps the logic behind that is because the long process three-step process required to acquire it, or the fact that because it's only a hard mode drop from Crota, it's measured against, well, the Vex Mythoclast in terms of a hard mode drop that's deserving of a beastly performance output. And if that's the logic presented, then I can somewhat agree to that. I can say I'm underwhelmed by it as an endgame hard mode drop because it has no utility in the Crucible, and it's basically not a weapon you want to bring into hard mode Crota's End at all. Unlike the Vex, which was quite good in both of those. I'm not much of a fan of the low impact, high fire rate model as it is, so that was a bit of a letdown. I wouldn't call it completely useless though. That's where I beg to differ. And if you value fun weapons more than weapons that are top tier, like say Fatebringer or Vision of Confluence, it's so much fun against mobs and even in strikes. If I were to change it, I'd have the impact buff slightly somewhere around, say, 8 to 10 as opposed to 2, lower the fire rate a bit slightly. Or even, at the very least, if you're going to leave those stats alone, have it so that the magazine size is buffed up a little bit to, say, 60 or so, as opposed to 42, so you're not really loading all that much. Overall, I'd say it's a really fun weapon in non-endgame PvE content, and just keep this weapon away from PvP. If you agree, disagree, let me know. Have a good one.